Hi everyone. Today our guest is Pooja Bhatt. She's a security analyst who researches and writes on maritime issues and the Indo-Pacific. Welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning. I'm so happy to be there for your show and talking about maritime issues. Thank you for inviting me.
I wanted to ask you about this topic because it's not really well researched or presented. So could you please tell us a little bit how much are they the focus of navies' attention and how vulnerable is this kind of infrastructure?
Yeah, undersea cables is actually a emerging security issue. However, undersea cables have been remained there for since 1850s for the for basically for telegram purposes. What has happened? What brought telegram cable and the undersea cables under this intense news is the recent blow-ups that we had seen in Red Sea when the Houthis had attacked our submarine cables, and then we had cable cuts in Taiwan and in several other incidents. We had the Nord Stream issue the last year. So all of a sudden, we realize that undersea cables have become vulnerable for various reasons. Because first of all, they not only carry the telecommunications and internet data, which is now the 95% of it, of which comes through submarine cables now, and we are so dependent on submarine cables. But also, it carries a lot of energy, oil and gas, and again we are all dependent upon oil and gas, and it's become a very easy target for the adversaries now to attack these important critical lines of communications, critical lines of energies. So it's easy to attack these and pose a national security threat. So let it be that way. Uh, Countries have realized that now they have to shift their focus on protecting these critical infrastructure as well, and therefore the navies are now coming into picture. Their original role isn't to be protecting submarine cables and undersea infrastructure. The original role is to fight wars, but now with the coming of so many incidents that we have seen in the recent times, navies are involving. Having said that, I think navies are still figuring out their role and how they want to protect it. Because when it comes to the territorial waters, navies still have jurisdiction over their sovereignty over the submarine cables, and they can still protect it from the adversaries coming in and destroying it. But when it comes to EEZ, which is exclusive economic zone, and where the countries do not have the sovereignty but sovereign rights over certain infrastructure, there it is where you can't avoid somebody coming in. But and how do you protect these cables? So that kind of operational issues, and how do you protect your infrastructure in open waters, and similar when it comes to high seas. So I think navies want to protect it, but they're still figuring out that what would be their jurisdiction, what would be their operation would look like, what would be the legislative processes they have to follow, because we have nothing neither on the domestic side nor at the international side. So I think these are the problems that the navies are basically figuring at the moment.
So from what you are saying, it's more like legal issues and not so much like I thought it would be rather maintenance issues or like security issues, but because I know one of the examples is the recent Taiwan case where it was really a problem to make them really work again because there were not enough vessels and boats to repair and maintain them. So is this an issue?
That is very well pointed, actually. Repair, cable laying and repair is a different industry altogether, which is a very niche industry, works very quietly. So, and also they are very, because they are very niche, they are very small in numbers. So we do not have too many cable repair ships and maintenance ships. So whenever these crisis happens, first of all, it is difficult for civilian ships which are doing this cable laying and repair to go to these places and do the repair, first of all. And second is they are aging. The fleet, the entire repair fleet is so old because they don't have the infrastructure funding. The fleet is old, the crew is old, and they are out of trainings and everything. So that remains another level of problem, that the entire cable repair industry needs funding and major overhaul. which is also another level of engagement, that how countries deal with this, because these are private industries. Do navies want to get involved with that? Do they should not get involved with? So these are the kind of question I think everyone is trying to grapple at the moment.
So it's just an ongoing issue. Who would, let's say, pay for it? Who will get involved in this? Is it more the civilian sector or the military sector? But the governments are aware they have to do something, yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I know you attended recently a conference dedicated to those issues. What was, let's say, the conclusion or the general outline? Like, was it more positive or negative? How much is being done here?
Yeah, so I think this recent conference that we did was a Maritime Security Conference, Center of Excellence, that was organized by NATO in Turkey, Istanbul. The entire idea was to delve into the same issues that we just talked about. How do you protect? How do navies and states protect this undersea infrastructure? And the same issues that we're talking about, the legal issues, operational issues, the technical issues, the jurisdiction issues, these were the issues were again grappled, because experts from each of the fields were there, and they were trying to bring out their own viewpoint to, to the NATO. The thing is, a lot of solutions lie in international maritime law, which is under UNCLOS, right? Um, Sadly, neither US nor Turkey are the signatories of UNCLOS. So, by the nature of it, for their own reasons, but they by spirit they both follow UNCLOS. So now we are basically trying to figure out the NATO, which is trying to now um, extend their area of operation, getting into new areas of collaborations. How does NATO come into collaborative mechanisms on these issues with the countries beyond its own NATO allied members? So these are the kind of questions we were actually trying to discuss and find out, in what ways can we cooperate. Is it a state level issue? Is it a technical issue? Is it a private industry issue? And how do we grapple with these so many stakeholders in so many issues, and having multi-layered of angles to these issues, as we talk about operational, legal, military, governments. So how do we bring them all together? So I think that's what we were all discussing. I think entire mood came out very positive, that everyone agreed that even though the infrastructure remains a private enterprise, most of the whether you talk about undersea infrastructure, whether to talk about space infrastructure, which also feeds into the maritime domain awareness, underwater domain awareness, all these infrastructure that we talk about, cybersecurity and everything, has a impact on human life. Therefore, people are involved in it, and therefore, once people get involved in it, their governments have to get involved in it, and therefore the governance has to remain there. We cannot leave the private infrastructure to run enterprises to run their private infrastructure. Governments have to come into it, the into the picture. And how would they want to come, to what limit and scope they would want to come, what is the kind of functioning they would want to have, whether they just lay the groundwork for the private enterprises to work, or they will have everyday monitoring to it. I think these are the questions which we pondered, and I think this will set a foundation for further conversations that NATO would have amongst their own allied members as well.
So that conference was probably a sign that those issues are more now on the radar and being maybe research investigated. To stay on this topic, I wanted to ask you about your experience from your recent visit in the United States. And you went there in the Indo-Pacific Secure and Sustainable Port Infrastructure Program in June, and you visited American ports and had various meetings. So, what's your takeaway from visiting the US and visiting their infrastructure?
That was a very interesting visit that we had. It was a 15-day visit to the US under a state program. It was organized by US State Department and CDRF Global as their partner. In that project, the cohort from South Asia and Southeast Asian countries had gone, people who are working on issues of port related security, sustainable infrastructure, as well as a clean energy infrastructure. So cohorts working on those actually visited these cities. We visited basically three cities: Port of LA, where we have two ports, Port of LA and Long Beach. We did Port of New Orleans, which is a Mississippi-based port, and also then finally we went to Washington. So the entire idea of the visit was to understand how US operates its ports in terms of infrastructure development, in terms of security, both physical and cyber security, and also they look how they are looking into the new technologies such as clean energies and new and sustainable infrastructure. What are new technologies they are developing using? I think it was a very fruitful 15 days of visit for us because we learned that US is also facing the same problem that rest of the world is facing. Maybe they are uh, trying to tackle it at various levels because then there is federal um, uh, um, you know overhaul notification given to the ports that they need to confine to certain security measures because we have adversities such as China is one of those adversities where their infrastructure can bring a lot of security dimensions to the port security. And also at the cybersecurity level, we have been facing a lot of threats from adversary countries on everyday level. Um, we had a discussion about MARSec line, if you remember last year, that dire line had shut down for a few days because of the cybersecurity threats. So I think we all discussed on the same lines, but US being US is definitely steps ahead in certain technologies, certain infrastructure development, and for countries like South Asian and Southeast Asian who are still grappling with their port infrastructure development, how to gain clean energy, how to what are the new energies, how to get fundings. So issues like this were exchanged, and I think we had an exchange of best practices also. And I think for the cohort, it was a good learning experience to take back and understand that how US operates, what are the good and the good points which we can best practices we can get back, and also there are certain good practices that our countries might have that US can also replicate. So I think that was a good exchange of knowledge we had. Yeah.
Dear viewers, help us overcome algorithm suppression by liking, commenting, and sharing this important content, especially since we talk to world's top experts.
So was it more a civilian or military purpose? Like, because you mentioned China and you mentioned the threats, so it was more about, let's say, the threat from China and more a military aspect. Yes.
Okay, so military, when we talk about military, it's more about wars and when your navies and armies get involved. But I think China threat is now beyond that. We see them as a supply chain disruptor. We see them as a cyber security threat. We see them as So there are different angles to how China is also posing threat. I think this civilian visit also made it very concrete for us to understand that it's just not the military threat we are looking. The ports are civilian infrastructures, they are commercial infrastructures, and even then they are facing these issues from China. So I don't think China has to be only seen as a military threat. It remains for a lot of countries, for including India, but their threat coming from them is even bigger because even for US, if we understand, China is not only a biggest trading partner for most of the South and Southeast Asian countries, but it is also a major partner for US. Surprisingly, unsurprising. So it was a good understanding that how trade has been weaponized. 80% of US owned trade comes to the from the port of LA and Long Beach, and it comes from China. It comes from Japan and Vietnam. So the moment China becomes a disruptor, in terms of disrupt the trade in any way, I think 80% of US economy would be impacted. And this is a strike reminder that if US can be impacted, rest of the world is not immune. So I think that was a good learning to understand it just here that China remains a threat beyond military threat.
Good. I would like to switch a little bit away from the infrastructure and more stay now a little bit in Asia, the India-China relationship. There both in Europe and the US, there is a lot of discussion about different bans or sanctions. I'm really curious, how did the Indian government manage it to so easily ban almost 60 apps, Chinese apps in June 2020? How was this consensus and such a swift action possible?
I think it was not a sudden decision. It was just long time coming, and we just needed a threshold point. It was just a moment that had come. That was supposed to come. Our security agencies have been noticing it for a long time, that how Chinese apps have been penetrating into Indian community, how they are misusing it, and the awareness was already there. It was just a matter of time that we had the Galwan crisis in 2020, and there were manifestations of it. And the security agencies understood that the Chinese apps are not just being a propaganda machine, but they are also using it wrongfully for economic means also. So there were certain Chinese apps which were asking Indian students to, pay for certain courses, and which never existed. So there were like a lot of economic ramifications which came in under notice. So I think the government became, and there was bipartisan support for the against the Chinese aggressiveness. It was very quick because of that kind of support from the public and from the both sides of government, both ruling and opposition. So it became very easy for the government to immediately come to this measure and put the things in place and apply those bans at the best. Like very quickly, we came up with those kind of bans. It was no matter of time that we could apply them.
What is the current situation in the Galvan Valley?
Okay, the Galwan Valley has been still under talks. I don't think we have reached any positive, uh, conclusion yet, because there have been several rounds of discussion, and every few months we have these, high level discussions from both sides. Of military leaders of both sides are meeting, and they are having these consultative meetings. But the outcome is nothing at the moment. They're just into a constant dialogue. But behind those dialogues, what exactly is happening? We are seeing a lot of infrastructure building up, both on the Chinese side of the border and Indian side of the border. So we have been seeing every day there are new roads coming up, new bridges coming up. There are new platoons which are being placed. There are new machineries and platforms, weapon platforms are being placed, not only in China's side, but now India has to be, India is being very proactive about it. So we also have like some entire brigades of units, military units, which are now established there. We have new weapon systems placed there. So I think while the discussions are on, the political leaders are not talking at the moment. Military leaders are talking, but there is a lot of infrastructure development going on. So I think a lot of happening in the Galwan side of northern border.
Another topic. 4 months ago, you participated in India's flagship multinational naval exercise, Milan 2024. Yes, could you please tell us a little bit, because that seems like a really, probably a very interesting meeting and conference. Yes.
Yes. So Milan is the largest, as you know, multinational exercise organized by Indian Navy. It was started in 1995. Initially, it was a very small, meeting of navies, basically to understand each other's operations, each other's. It was more of a interoperability exercise, basically to understand each other. Gradually, more countries added up, and now I think this time we had around 50 odd countries, 50 odd navies which were present with their, and a lot of their ships were present and Vizag. So it happens in Vishakhapatnam on the eastern border of India, and it is the command which also oversees the eastern seas, Bay of Bengal and beyond. So I think that is a very crucial thing to see, because we are also seeing towards South China Sea and China. So the location remains very important. Why we have Milan in eastern border. Also, it was the first time that academia was invited for these events, because these are mostly the naval events, and the exchanges remain generally very closed door. But I think there's a increasing understanding that people are also interested in the maritime issues, and they want to understand how it is, how what are the discussions going on, and what are the conversations. So I think it was a very good experience as an academician to attend one of the first open forum for MILAN. So they also have two phases of it. One is the academic side, which happens on the shore, and also then they go to the seas for their practice. So we were invited for the shore based discussions. It was around 2 days, 3 days of discussions, which we had heads of several navies coming up and speaking their views about how they see maritime security, how they see the security of Indo-Pacific and Indian Ocean region particularly. We had a varied range of viewpoints from various naval leaders. So there were smaller countries who see maritime security as more existential threat, and their threats were very non-traditional, like maritime piracy, fishing fleets, and climate change issues. So that was their existential issues. However, for the bigger navies, which are more blue water navies, which go to the distant far, for them there are issues of adversaries, and again IUU fishing and emerging undersea cable and other technology issues. So the levels of issues, you could see that for navies it depends, it was varying, and with those kind of varying interests, they want to collaborate in the and find areas of cooperation. So I think that was understanding with the entire Milan.
Thank you very much. My last question refers to the recent Modi visit in Moscow. What do you think about that?
Modi's visit to Russia comes in a very interesting time when India is actually having good relationships with the US, and actually, India's long-term Russian relationship is actually seeing some kind of upheavals at the moment. Our relation, though Russia has remained a long-time partner of India, there have been certain issues where India is actually trying to sort out its bilateral relations with India. One being the oil and gas issue, which where we want to keep purchasing oil because Russian oil is cheaper for various reasons, and we need a lot of oil for our own development. So it's purely national interest. Another major reason that for which Prime Minister Modi was in Russia was a lot of Indians were recruited through under a certain we are not very clear about the under which means they went, but they were recruited and they were actually fighting within the Russian forces, and which became a matter of actually domestic concern in India. So I think issues like these were very important for India to sort out with Russia, because while we are looking for a good relationship with Russia, we are also aware that certain issues are having domestic implications within the country. So I think the entire visit was to maybe not let a relationship slide, even if it's not it's not getting better, but at least we have had these, several decades of good relation. We have military supplies coming from Russia. We have oil supplies coming from Russia. We have long-term cultural and historical connects, which still remain very deep within Indian system. So I think to save all that, and there is a huge Indian population who has a soft corner for Russia and vice versa. So I think there are these connections for which he, as a leader, needs to take care. And I think the entire visit has to be seen from that perspective. That even though two countries can have issues with each other, they need to remain continued discussions with each other. And he, as a leader, I think understands that importance of continued discussion with the country, with where maybe your relationship is not going as good as you consider, but the discussion has to remain. I think that was understood.
Studio Asia is an independent channel. I am neither looking for sponsors nor asking you for donations. I value much more your comment under this interview. It means a lot to me, a lot. Subscribing and sharing helps me to be promoted by YouTube. I will appreciate it very, very much.
If I understood you correctly, you mentioned that there is also some kind of societal connection, like there is a sympathy from Indians to Russians and the other way, yes?
Yes, it has been long standing because if this goes historical, basically when India got independence, and we had huge GDP issues where we did not have grains in India for the to feed the Indians. I think Russians were that time were the most forthcoming, giving us the oil and gas, and maybe the a lot of grains came from Russia during that time. So I think that generation of Indians are, they feel that kind of connection and indebtedness to them, and also Russia feel a lot of that because we have a lot of Russians coming to India, and there is a huge cultural community which believes in Hare Rama Hare Krishna, if you've heard. So they have a lot of affiliation towards that community in India, and a lot of Russians come to India for those purposes. So there is this kind of cultural historical connect which might not seem very tangible, but it does make a lot of difference when it comes to India-Russia relations, historical and cultural. Yeah,
Pooja, thank you very much for your time. It was really a pleasure.
thank you so much for having me and talking to me.
I have so many other explosive interviews on this and similar topics. Please check out my channel.